to have our federal lobbyists here. This is a workshop on having a discussion. It's actually not a workshop, it's a discussion, a county board discussion with our government relations team, our board, and our federal lobbyists. We're happy to have Mike and Dawn Erlinson with us, and Tom Downs, who's from DC, coming in from DC. And we're just excited to talk about our federal update, because we all know how important it is to have our federal partners working with us. And then after we get done with that discussion, we'll do a brief update on our state work. So with that, Jennifer, I'm gonna hand it over to you and welcome our guests again. Thanks for being here. And thank you, Jennifer O'Rourke, and to recognize Melissa Finnegan, who is Jennifer is our Director of Government Relations, and Melissa Finnegan is also with our Government Relations.
Thanks, Commissioner McGuire. That was a great intro. I'd like to thank everybody for their time this morning, and I'll jump right into it. County Manager O'Connor for giving us this time slot. Commissioners for your attention today and always being available for our work, both at the state capitol and with our federal work. And then I really want to thank the Aurora. All know they came to us. We started this contract in March, and they've been especially helpful in so many ways as we navigate this new world in our nation's capital. I'm going to shift to Mike Erlinson in a second, but I just point out for the group, we really wanted this to be a discussion. And I want to thank all the staff that are on this as well. There's certainly quite a few people joining us today. When Mike does second to just introduce themselves and rattle off some of your communities, because I think that would be good for the getting to know the county as well. Let's see. And lastly, I would just share that we put together some slides because we wouldn't be good lobbyists if we didn't have some information to share. And I think it's always helpful to have an agenda to walk through. So I want to thank the Aurora team for that. I think our agenda today will be, we'll use a lot of our time on the federal update, if you will, and Dawn Erlinson and I can kind of handle questions and assign them as those come up and we get into the discussion part of it. We shouldn't need a lot of time for the state update at the end. I know we're going to want to wind this up by noon, and I gave a pretty thorough update at the end of last week's board meeting. So, 5 or 10 minutes would be more than enough.
Thanks, Jen. And do you want us to introduce ourselves first, or did you want those federal lobbyists to go?
Sure, why don't we do commissioners first?
Why don't we do commissioners by district? So Commissioner Fretham, you can start.
All right, Commissioner Nicole Fretham. I represent District 1, which is the northern Ramsey County suburbs. So all are part of the cities of Spring Lake Park, Lane, Mounds View, Arden Hills, Shoreview, North Oaks, Gem Lake, Vadnais Heights, and White Bear Township.
Thank you, Commissioner Fretham, and I'm Mary Jo McGuire, Commissioner District 2, and I have the communities of Roseville, Little Canada, New Brighton, Lauderdale, Mounds View Precinct 4, and St. Anthony Village, Ramsey County portion. It's good to see you all. Okay, District 3.
Trista Mattis Castillo, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 3, and I represent St. Paul, north of University Avenue from Edgerton over to the State Fairgrounds on Snelling, and also the city of Falcon Heights.
Hi, Tony Carter, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 4, which includes the central area in St. Paul in between Minneapolis, the river, as well as heading toward the Capitol, Rice Street, points in between all the way back to Falcon Heights, and also Northern Highland.
Rafael Ortega, Ramsey County Commissioner for District 5, which includes Highland, Mac Grove, West 7th, downtown, West Side, 3 neighborhoods on the east side, the Capital District, and all of downtown.
And Jim McDonough, District 6, representing the east side of St. Paul.
Victoria Reinhardt, Ramsey County Commissioner for District 7, and I represent 1 precinct on the east side of St. Paul, as well as the cities of Maplewood, North St. Paul, and White Bear Lake.
Thank you all, commissioners. And is there anyone I know that maybe County Manager O'Connor who wants to introduce himself? But I think, yeah, if there's anyone else on the call that we should be introducing, then please let's do that.
Madam Chair, hi, Ryan O'Connor, Ramsey County Manager.
Thanks, everybody. Why don't we turn it over to Mike Erlinson?
Well, good morning, Chair McGuire and Chair Carter and commissioners. It's an honor to be with you this morning, and even a bigger honor to be working with Ramsey County. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And certainly Jennifer and Melissa have been drinking from the fire hose with us since we came on the team, as Jennifer called out in March, and they have been critical to our efforts to get things where they're at today, which we'll talk about a little bit further on in the presentation. So look forward to the conversation this morning. It's also nice to see some faces. I won't say old faces, but faces that I've seen for a long time in politics and in public policy in Minnesota. So again, it's exciting to be working with you. By way of quick background, for those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, I did have the honor of spending 20 years working for Martin Sabo, who represented the 5th Congressional District in Congress for a long time, back when Congressman Vento was the 4th Congressional District and represented Ramsey County. So those two were great friends. Unfortunately, they've left us after spending that time on Capitol Hill, and most of it was a lot less partisan than it is today. And so hopefully one day our nation and our state and will find their way back to some less partisan times. At least I'm cautiously optimistic and believe that, as you guys know, as well as I do, to remain optimistic is so critical in the roles that you have as elected officials and those of us that have the honor of supporting you. After Mr. Sabo, I did spend 8 years in corporate America working for then a company called Super Value, which was headquartered here in Minnesota. The time there was a great learning time, not just about how corporations work, but we got to do some really cool and exciting things that I was honored to lead, including an effort working with then First Lady Michelle Obama to build 150 grocery stores and food deserts across the country. And another one had a chance to work with President Obama and former president at the time, Bill Clinton, on a climate change initiative where we took it upon ourselves at Super Value to retrofit over 4,000 grocery stores to make them more environmentally friendly, so to speak, and reduce our carbon footprint. Both of those things were called out at White House events, and so that was kind of an exciting way to remain involved in public policy while being the corporate communications and government relations guy. After the company split up, I found myself trying to decide what I was going to do next. And I had this lovely lady who I'll turn to next, Dawn Erlinson, who was running a public affairs business in Minnesota. And she was kind enough to give me an office. And so since then, I've had the opportunity to work with Dawn and represent a number of clients on the state level and the federal level, ranging from governmental entities like the county to private entities and nonprofits. And with that, again, thank you for the opportunity, and I'll pitch it to Dawn.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all, at least virtually today. And thank you again for including us on your federal government relations team. You have an excellent staff to work with, and we appreciate that. I spent 3 sessions when I was a young woman at the Minnesota State Capitol, while both in college and the year following. I then had the honor to work briefly for Congressman Bruce Vento, and followed by a United States Senator from Michigan. I left the Hill to do policy and advocacy work for a national environmental organization. And while there, crafted and lobbied for the first green tax package signed into law by President George Herbert Walker Bush, back again in the, as Mike mentioned, the days of more bipartisanship. For the last 15 years, I've run Aurora, and we focus on the nexus of policy, communications, and advocacy work. And a good portion of our work is federal in nature. And like you, I am also a public official in Minnesota, albeit not paid very well. Governor Dayton twice appointed me to serve on the board of Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. And I'm also completing my service on the board of the Association of Community College Trustees this year as immediate past chair. That's a national organization representing trustees from all over the country. And I'll turn it over to our partner, Tom Downs.
Thank you so much, Don. Thank you so much, Commissioner McGuire and fellow commissioners. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Jen and Melissa, for organizing our meeting today. Background on me, I'm an attorney and a consultant based here in Washington, D.C. Been here a little more than 30 years. Been through some very interesting time talking about the former era of bipartisanship. I worked for 10 years on Capitol Hill, including a couple of years of service in the Minnesota delegation. Time spent with Mike Erlandson in the office of the former Congressman Martin Olaf Sabo. I also worked for a Republican office and for a senator who's currently the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Pat Leahy from Vermont. But for the last 20 plus years, I've been a lobbyist here in Washington. Big chunk of that time at large DC law firms, but more recently on a more entrepreneurial platform and partnering with Mike and Don Erlandson. Really thrilled to be working with you all. There's so many different initiatives that we've been working on and exploring for the future. I'll just mention one area I've focused on behalf of counties and cities around the country over the years is river improvement and watershed improvement initiatives representing Bexar County and the city of San Antonio, Texas. We got a lot of federal support and funding for the San Antonio River Improvement Project over the years. And similarly for Jacksonville, the consolidated Duval County, Jacksonville area in Florida, we got a tremendous amount of support from the White House and various agencies for the St. Johns River improvements. So as we talk about the Mississippi River watershed and the interest that Congresswoman Betty McCollum and others have in a watershed-wide initiative all the way from New Orleans to the Twin Cities area, there are a lot of things that we've identified that we can work on in the years ahead. Very excited about that. The elements that come into that with tourism, economic development, urban economic development, and environmental sustainability. So with that, I just thank you so much for this opportunity. Really enjoyed working with you and very nice to meet you all virtually. Hope we'll get a chance to meet in person fairly soon.
Thank you so much. It is fun to see familiar faces. Many people don't know that I actually served in the legislature with Martin Sabo. And I mean, when he was in Congress, and I door knocked with Martin Sabo, probably with Mike and Dawn. I've known you for a long time, and Tom, who knows if we saw each other in DC. But it's great to have you on board. And just so you know, I think you already know this, that Commissioner Mattis Castillo and I, with General Work and Melissa Finnegan, make up the legislative team for the county, and that's why I'm chairing this meeting today. But we're all very interested and we're all very involved in our federal platform, our federal work. And so we're excited to have you here today. So with that, Jen, I think, or no, Mike, are you gonna start with the slides?
Yeah, sure. I'll do my best to drive, but as I think Jennifer said earlier, please feel free to wave your hands or raise your hands or just step in, commissioners, if you have a thought or a question or a disagreement or whatever it might be along the way. We certainly want this to be a conversation and not us talking at you with slides that sometimes can be a distraction on that as well. And so this is just a little bit on the political landscape in Washington, and Tom's going to take the first few bullet points. So Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. Mike mentioned earlier his work with President Obama and former President Clinton. I had the chance to work with both of those presidents and meet them. I can't say I spent a tremendous amount of time with them, but I have met President Biden and the First Lady. One thing Don and I have in common is we both do a lot of work with community colleges. And as you may know, Dr. Jill Biden is the first ever First Lady of the United States who's actually employed in a job while serving in the White House. So, and that job is an English faculty member at Northern Virginia Community College. So We are so fortunate to have an incredibly accomplished team with the President of the United States, who served so many years in the Senate and as Vice President, and the Vice President having served in the Senate and statewide in California. Just a few notes, the cabinet of the Biden administration is really, really well qualified. We have 3 former governors, 3 former members of Congress, 2 former mayors. In terms of representing diverse populations, we have folks in the cabinet who represent African-American, Latino, LGBT communities for the first time ever. We have the first ever Indigenous person as a member of the cabinet, Deb Holland from New Mexico, who of all things oversees the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Really pretty remarkable. We, as Mike has mentioned, we have a very, we have a bit of partisan gridlock right now. We have a very, very close balance of power now, as you know, in the Senate with a 50-50 tie. That includes, of course, 2 independents, Angus King from Maine and Bernie Sanders from Vermont, who are caucusing with the Democrats. So it's a little dicey navigating the Senate right now. And of course, Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, does have that ability to cast the tie-breaking vote if and when a bill can be brought to the Senate, given the rules around the requirements for a larger majority before many votes can happen. So we'll see how that goes. Of course, Senator Joe Manchin is in the news a lot from West Virginia, who seems to be the other very powerful Joe these days in Washington. Similarly, the House of Representatives is also a very, very close majority right now. The balance of power is 219 Democrats to 212 Republicans. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is still able to get some Republican support for many initiatives, but it is increasingly polarized. It's more and more difficult to move with bipartisan support on some of the initiatives that President Biden and his administration are bringing forward. But we're hopeful. There are a lot of new initiatives that we're working on that are of interest to Ramsey County that we'll talk about. But I think I'll pass it back to Mike with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. The next few points on here are just kind of a little bit of the landscape that you guys know from your own work here in Minnesota, and certainly being people that no doubt follow the national stuff. I mean, COVID-19 has certainly been 100% of a bunch of people's work in Washington, D.C. since it came on the nation. Obviously, the packages of relief that have been sent to counties and cities and states. Those 2 pieces of legislation passed the end of last year and earlier in 2020 were the single largest pieces of monetary legislation ever passed in the United States Congress. And much of it without a lot of rules accompanying it. As you guys know, as you waited for the Treasury documents to come through and how you can spend the resources coming to the county. Some of that is clear, some of it remains unclear, and we're certainly happy to, as we've shared with Jennifer and Melissa, engage with the Biden administration if it's appropriate to get more clarity on something that the county may want to use their resources to do as this process continues for the next few years. The money that came to COVID is being more and more closely watched, I would say, in Washington, D.C. There was even an effort a week ago about if people aren't spending it in the right ways, could they claw it back to use it for something else? And so I think as members of Congress and others get more time, they're going to continue to scrutinize those resources because, again, it was done in earnest, but at the same time, everybody wants to ensure that the funds are spent in things that make a difference and help address the challenges facing residents of your county and residents across the United States as well. So won't call out the partisanship too much more other than the President Biden has been clear that he would like to work with the Republicans on passing some things. At the same time, as Tom just pointed out, when you have almost a 50-50 split in both the House and the Senate, one would think that would create an opportunity for more bipartisanship. Ironically, the last decade, the more closely divided our Congress is, the more partisan it has become. And so we'll see what happens as this continues. I'm again hopeful that we don't have a go it alone strategy coming out of the White House and Congress and Democrats just passing things through, even though we might all agree that we'd like to see the majority of those things enacted into law. I have found in my 20 years working on Capitol Hill that when you have no support from the other party, whether that's Democrats and or Republicans, depending on who's in the majority, those things don't have the same lasting impact as the legislation might otherwise be. You know, the big tax cut a few years ago, I think if it had been able to get some Democrat support, probably would have made more sense. And certainly Obamacare or the big healthcare proposal, had it been able to get some Republican support, probably would have been a better piece of legislation. But we'll see what happens. You've all heard about the big infrastructure bill that's pending before Congress, and that's the one that will be the test of, I think, the president, and can he bring Republicans together? I know he's waiting on their latest counteroffer as we speak this morning. So, and then there's the former president who does not seem to want to release his hold on the Republican Party to the degree that he actually has one. I think it's somewhat manifested in the reactions that a number of Republican members have. And so that just creates another challenge for the leadership in both the Democrats and the Republicans in the US Congress to try to get things done when people don't quite know how to address the former president. So he's been quieted to some degree, which has probably helped the public policy debate in Washington because of the social media challenge or being turned off, so to speak. How long that lasts and how long he has an impact on public policy. Politics is a different thing. That's not what we're here to talk about. I'll leave that to smarter people than us. But the hold that he has on the Republican Party, unfortunately, does have a negative impact on the ability to advance good, solid public policy. Because again, it kind of prevents some of the bipartisanship that might otherwise happen. So with that, I'll kick it to Dawn, who's going to talk just a little bit more about earmarks and our local member of Congress, Betty McCollum.
Thank you, Mike. And maybe President Trump can take up painting like President George W. Bush has done, and he's got a new book out, which is pretty cool about immigrants. So bringing the federal focus more closely to what you all care about and work on every day. As you well know, earmarks, or congressionally directed spending, which is maybe a better way to describe what it is, have returned to Washington, albeit in different form than they were 10 years ago or so. They're more limited. Everything must be published publicly, which is a good thing, but not all federal agencies and federal spending is open to earmarking. Certainly not in the House bill. The Senate has a little more broadly defined the opportunities. The good news is both Congresswoman McCollum and both of our US senators are accepting earmark requests. And we are excited that Congresswoman McCollum has included Ramsey County projects in her published list. And we've met with the Senate staff, and they're very interested in your projects as well. Nothing has been publicly released so far on the Senate side. In terms of timing, the House is moving via regular order, meaning that individual appropriation committee bills will likely pass individually. So the defense subcommittee bill will move under Chairwoman McCollum's direction separately from, say, the bill that funds the legislative branch. In fact, the House is moving toward the Appropriations Committee with member testimony as early as this week. The Senate, on the other hand, is not operated under regular order, passing individual appropriations bills. In recent years, they move everything through very large packages. So we really have no idea when the Senate will take action or they will reveal projects slated for earmarks. And we might not know until December, when they pass a very large bill with everything in it, soup to nuts policy, the funding. We are very fortunate that Congresswoman McCollum is a subcommittee chair on the Appropriations Committee, and that she is both powerful and hardworking, and that is very much to Ramsey County's benefit. So I'm going to turn it back to Mike, is that right? For the next slide.
Yep, next slide. And I think we've got Tom kicking off the top of that as well.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's funny, for those of you who may be familiar with DC, you may be aware of our phenomenon called cicadas. If I were to open my door here in my office out to our patio, you would hear a very loud din of these little critters that come once every 17 years. And it kind of feels that way with earmarks. It's hasn't been 17, but it's been over a decade since we've had this opportunity. I did a lot of work from the years 1995 through 2010 as a lobbyist on behalf of, as I said before, cities and counties and public higher ed, community colleges especially. And, you know, I think that became a very reliable form of funding each year. You can view it almost as taking the competitive out of competitive grants and really recognizing that a member of Congress and a senator has a unique appreciation and understanding of what their constituents want to do, and maybe more so than someone who works in a government agency grant office in Washington, D.C. So that was a very reliable process we had for almost 15 years. And it became somewhat problematic toward the end of that decade of the 2000s when we had the bridge to nowhere in Alaska. Some of you may remember, which actually was a project to build a bridge to an airport in Alaska, but it became publicized as a controversial project. And the Tea Party movement took advantage of that. But now 10 years later, I think a lot of folks, especially on the Republican side on Capitol Hill, really feel as though they've been disconnected from that opportunity to have a voice in where the federal the power of the purse is going and where federal money is being directed, when they know, especially when it comes to infrastructure projects and human needs in their districts and states, where they know the needs are. So this will be a work in progress, as Don mentioned. It's fairly limited starting out on the House side, limiting each member of Congress to just 10 projects. The Senate is not necessarily comfortable with that. They're interested in a more expansive approach. But we'll see. We're going to take it one step at a time. We do hope that it will be bipartisan and that it will be sustainable and a really good opportunity in the years ahead. By the way, it's not just the annual appropriations bills, because Congress, years ago, Congressman Tim Penny from Minnesota was advocating for a 2-year budget cycle. Year after year, he promoted that. But we're still operating on a year-to-year fiscal cycle. But we do have these multi-year authorization bills for example, surface transportation, highway and transit, water resources, Army Corps of Engineer, flood protection, navigation projects, infrastructure projects. So these are opportunities where Congress periodically updates and reauthorizes federal programs. So those authorization bills, also those multi-year federal authorization bills, are opportunities potentially for earmarks as we move forward. So there's a lot of potential, obviously, with Congresswoman McCollum, her position with the delegation being as they say, a cardinal on the Appropriations Committee, is an incredibly valuable resource for Ramsey County. So I'll turn it back to Mike.
Thanks, Tom. You know, and just a little context about, you know, the amount of quote unquote earmarks or congressionally directed spending, or in the House, they call them community projects. It was interesting to watch where when this whole return of earmarks started, that everybody did not want to use the word earmarks. And then the Appropriations Committee itself published a document calling earmarks earmarks. So I guess if it quacks like a duck, call it a duck, or whatever the expression would be as it relates to earmarks in the 21st century. They did limit the earmarks to 1% of the US budget, which is certainly a significant amount of money. They also limited the earmarks to not being able to go to a for-profit entity, for example. And so we'll see how all of those sorts of things play out. You know, at its height of earmarking, Congress probably did about 2% of the federal budget. And so we're not really that far off what would have been a return to the tradition if you take away the fact that there will be no private sector earmarks, at least in FY22. My former boss used to say when he was not, when quote unquote, defending earmarks, because everybody made such a huge deal how horrible this was, that Congress would dare direct some of the funding versus giving it to the administration to do. And we all know that the administration, whether that be a Democrat or Republican, that's the president, is still going to control 99% of the federal spending coming out of Washington, D.C. And then he used to laugh. He says, if I'm the congressman from the 5th district on the appropriations committee and I'm earmarking some funds, and suddenly the president appoints, and that's less than 2% again, and suddenly the president appoints me as the Secretary of Transportation, where I now get to pick 99%, that I'm going to no longer be partisan in that process, right? So the earmarks are something that people fight for in Congress, and in my opinion, they should, because that's part of the job. Return to your district, fight for your state. But in the end, still most of the funds in Washington come through the administration. And of course, the majority of those come through federal formulas. And so we got lucky, I think, here just a couple of weeks ago as it relates to the Minnesota federal formula, in the fact that we didn't lose a member of the United States Congress as part of redistricting. Because had we, every single formula that calculates how the vast majority of those resources flow out of Washington would have dropped to a lower amount, because we would have had 7 instead of 8, or 9 instead of 10 members of Congress in Washington, D.C. So Jennifer, I'm not sure if you'd like to speak, or Melissa, a little bit to the specific earmarks, or if the commissioners are already up to speed on that, but why don't I turn this a bit to you?
Okay. I think everyone can hear me because I'm unmuted. The bullets right in the center of your screen should not be a surprise to anybody. The Bruce Vento Trail Extension, the Rice Street Revitalization Project, and then the one on the bottom, the Community Violence Prevention, and along with the other bullet too, excuse me, we called that earlier, it was a HUD appropriation we were going after. It was more of a housing project. We submitted all 4 of those to McCollum's office back, I think they were due on April 2nd. And as Mike and Tom laid out, this all started on the House side with very small appropriations, something I think that the cap was around 1.5 million. So we submitted these at different levels. We were asked to rank them. Chair Carter wrote a letter of support, and I know a lot of you have been asked to write letters of support that were submitted for different projects, whether they be more city related or some of our county related, or even some of the nonprofits and stuff. But that's what took place on the House side. The Senate side, just last week, with both Klobuchar and Smith's office, their due date was last Friday. So that was May 21st. And because we kind of wanted to submit something fresh on their side, and because our housing project had not advanced out of McCollum's office onto her list, we took the housing supports one and kind of added to it, if you will, and submitted that to both the Senate offices as the number 1. Melissa, do you have anything you want to add to that, or maybe you could describe it in a little bit more detail?
Sure. So the Holistic Housing Supports Caring Collective proposal is really focused on wraparound supports for families that are both living in shelters as well as those who are in publicly supported housing. The goal being, if you can help these families connect to programs that will help them get childcare, employment, those sorts of supports that will help them sustain their existence on that knife edge so that they don't fall back into homelessness. One thing we know is that homelessness can be a cyclical problem. People get out of homelessness, get housing, and then they can't manage to maintain it, and then they fall back in. The other interesting piece of this, and one thing that's added in based on conversations we had with people living in shelters, is the need to connect them to supports for mental health services, particularly for their children. These parents are very concerned about the mental health impacts on their children. So that's an interesting and slightly different feature of this proposal.
Thanks, Melissa. I'll just point out another kind of interesting piece of the puzzle as we walked through this since March. The Rice Street Revitalization Project is a good one to point out, because when we submitted it on the appropriations side, it was in the neighborhood of 1.5 million. but Congresswoman McCollum's office came back and wanted to submit it in the transportation and infrastructure column, which bumped that up to, I think, around $6.5 or $6.8 million. So it's a good example of how a lot of this is changing, if you will. And I'll leave it at that. I don't know if maybe now's a good time to stop and answer any questions if commissioners have any.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen and Melissa and Dawn and Mike and Tom. Thank you for all of that. Okay, yes, we do have questions from commissioners. So Commissioner McDonough and then Commissioner Manis-Castillo.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I appreciate the update on the request here to our delegation. Wasn't quite aware of the proposal that we put into the senator's office. And it's a great proposal. You know, this is an area I work in every day, and I think it's really needed. But I guess my question is, what about, I mean, as we want to be strategic, right? There's $5 billion worth of HUD money that address a lot of these things that are in that earmark request. You know, so why strategically, why wouldn't we focus in on, you know, competing in that $5 billion HUD pot and bringing in as much money that way, and take a look at where there might be a gap with federal partnership and support with money, and focus on congressional directed appropriations that way versus this overlap of where there's already a large pot of money.
Chair McGuire, Commissioner McDonough, good question. Cut me off if I didn't quite understand what you're saying, but a couple thoughts. One, this caring collective is really viewed as an opportunity with a very limited amount of money, you know, less than $1 million. Could we do something that would be considered a national model that could be leveraged across the country, but could put Ramsey County sort of on the forefront of helping solve some of these issues, and show how that if you have people focused on this wraparound, as Melissa called out, that it would make a difference. As it relates to the larger pot of funds, there is going to be plenty of opportunity, I believe, for us to battle for extra resources for Ramsey County that wouldn't be necessarily an earmark, but that rather would be the funds as they become available. If we've got initiatives in the county, then how do we leverage our 2 senators and the Congresswoman to go to bat with the Biden administration to make sure that we can bring those resources back to Ramsey County, if that makes sense, Commissioner. So we're not excluding or precluding those, and there's certainly going to be a lot of opportunity, particularly in the housing space. And we did have some pretty extensive conversations with Jen and Melissa and, on the team to make sure we were focused on something that was a possibility. And this was an account when the other ones were no longer available for earmarks, that we thought we could do something potentially, you know, sort of groundbreaking in Ramsey County with the earmark component. But I fully agree with the larger pot of resources there. We need to be mindful. And you know, some of those may tie to the resources the county is getting directly in the housing area as well. And you know, how are those being leveraged? Can we create, if necessary, flexibility for the county there to tackle problems that may or may not be excluded by the Treasury Department rule, for example, in this case, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm gonna call on Commissioner Manis-Castillo, and then I have some questions on this as well. But Commissioner Manis-Castillo.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering, I just want to make sure I'm fully understanding when you say some were submitted to the House, some were submitted to the Senate. Were all 4 submitted to both sets of offices? Or, I mean, that's the part I'm confused by, is what, and then what happens now that they've been submitted to the Senate side and the House? How do they get funded, or how do they move through the process?
And so thank you for the question, Commissioner, and Jennifer can chime in too if she would like. But the Vento Trail, Rice Street, were both, and community violence prevention are 3 earmarks of Congresswoman McCollum's on the House side. And those, and as Jennifer just said, the Rice Street project was moved into the authorization, transportation and infrastructure bill versus the appropriations process. On the House side, they are doing earmarks in both of those bills, as either Tom or Don just called out as well. The Senate side, unfortunately, and I love this line that my partner Tom uses all the time, right? And Don kind of spoke a little bit to the process. The House follows the rules, so to speak, a little bit, at least as the year marches on. The Senate, our projects were submitted to the senators as well, but the Caring Collective was a new project that went just to the 2 senators and was not submitted on the House side because it was submitted, as Jennifer said, in a different form. And so we changed it to be a little bit more of a national model, a little bit more of the wraparound. So I would love to say that the Senate is going to start producing individual appropriations bills, and they're going to release those bills with the same identification of their community or their earmarks as the House side. But hopefully I'll be proven wrong on this, but I don't expect that to happen. I fully expect that most senators will submit their projects, but other than us working with Senate staff, we won't know for sure, or the public won't know for sure what's being put forward and what's not being put forward. And we never quite got to, and we'll get there in a minute, I think, to the next steps part. But, you know, we, as a county, we may have to make choices further down the process. You know, if Senator Klobuchar says, well, I can do this, and Senator McCollum has something different, and we have to trade something. My gut is we may not have to do as much trading in the case of Ramsey County, because we, again, as Don called out earlier, we have a very powerful member of Congress in Betty McCollum. So knock on wood, I think projects on her list are projects that are likely to become a reality. The senators will certainly also have projects. They are both well-respected and on committees that will make a difference for the county and for the project. So hopefully those will come forward. But we do have a slightly different mix of projects on the House side, only by the one. And I would say that as we prepare for, FY23, going to work on this stuff next year, which I think we may talk a little bit more about later if we have time, but, getting on top of the county's federal priorities and spending a little bit more time on what might be the areas that we can seek earmarks in, and and then you guys as commissioners can have a healthy debate around that, right? When you guys put your federal platform together last year, nobody knew that we were going to suddenly have earmarks come roaring back in Washington, D.C. After the change of the administration and Congress, including the Republicans, basically voting to say, hey, we're going to bring these things back. So, and making sure that, we worked really hard too as it related to River's Edge, because we know that's a top priority of the counties, but we just couldn't find the right account to allow us to put resources to that project as it was in its current ready to go capacity, or however you want to describe it, right? But and we've been spending a lot of time with Jennifer, Melissa, Tom, and I trying to figure out how do we pursue something. And so I think as we get past this, our submissions that we have a lot of work to do with for FY22, we start to have our conversations about next year. We start to, as your team, we can learn a little bit more about these projects, and we can give better recommendations about what is the component potentially of River's Edge that we could get resources for, that we can get Congresswoman McCollum or Senator Klobuchar or Smith excited about, right? And that there's then a federal account that can take a funding request. That was one of our challenges as well in FY22, is the House and Senate published accounts that members could seek earmarks from. And unlike, back before I had all this gray hair, we did earmarks based on whatever account we decided to try to pursue an earmark in. And so the challenge of FY22 is the members of the House had to choose projects, they had to publish the projects, and they had to try to fit, round pegs and square holes because the accounts didn't match up. And that's what happened, for example, with River's Edge. There was just no square peg to put in a square hole on a funding category that was on the list, just for example. So I think we'll be able to do a better job as we work with you guys to develop next year's recommendations and support priorities, and then have a robust conversation sometime later this summer or fall about what things might the county like to pursue, again, to make a difference for the residents of Ramsey County. And I'm always a big believer, to view earmarks, because sometimes they are limited in scope. It's not a $50 million thing necessarily, but is there something that $1 million or $2 million could really bend the curve on for the county and get people excited? And then more money comes in, right? Because you do something that makes a difference. And I think, the Caring Collective could be that component that helps, back to Commissioner McDonough's question, that helps us, somehow pull in bigger buckets of funds on the housing side, because something we're doing in Ramsey County is viewed as a little bit more exciting, or it leverages us in a different way. So how do you leverage these earmarks into something bigger? And I think that's exactly what Congresswoman McCollum is trying to do with the funds that she set aside for the Rondo Land Bridge, or whatever the right way to call that is. But can we get something started? Can we see if it's feasible? And so you use a certain amount of resources. I think that one's about $6 million. Does that end up being a 250 or a $500 million project, right? I mean, that's the scope of what it would take to do a project like that. And I'm talking too much, so please, just everybody put up your hands simultaneously, and I'll shush up, but I'll stop there.
No, thank you. Thank you, Mike. I think we do have a lot of questions because this all happened pretty fast, and it was new for all of us. We wait, we have to get our list out, and we had to get letters of support, and it doesn't fit in here, and she's going to put housing in this bill. And I think we were all in that place. So it helps to hear some of this background of, why is this not here and why is it here, and these different pots of money. So, but I'm going to call in Commissioner Reinhardt and then Commissioner Carter.
Okay, now I think you can hear me.
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think you just said it very well as far as the different avenues. And I think just as we do at the state legislature, we have projects that are similar or the same in many different committees or options as far as how we make sure that we're drawing attention. So any avenue to focusing or leveraging, and even if it's the same thing in both places, they may have different focuses on what we're trying to do with that. So I think that the fact that we see different things in the House and in the Senate and in different pools of funds, and just really raising the bar for us, I guess, in a good way, that we are letting our legislators know what we need, why we need it, and are willing to be flexible on how they can find the funds or divvy up the funds as they're going forward. So, and again, I think it's important to note that the earmarks are a pretty small part of what is going to be coming through. So again, having our projects or our programs, our policy changes in as many areas as possible, I think is incredibly important. And I really appreciate the way our legislative team has pulled that together. So I can see where it can be a little confusing sometimes because you see things in different places, but it's all good. And I really appreciate, and I do have to do a shout out to Dawn and to Mike on the environmental work that you've done in the past. I've worked very closely with you and Tom, and it's just the professionalism and the respect that this group has in Washington, D.C. and in the state of Minnesota is really pretty incredible. So thank you for the past work and for what you're doing for us now, and making sure that our projects they're in everybody's attention wherever we can get them there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. Appreciate that. Commissioner Carter.
Thank you. It's interesting how quickly this came up, and I just really want to thank our folks for the work that you've done to make certain to organize and understand and present these projects. Certainly, there were some that are well known that we're working through, but others that are in development and that even required a reach out. And I'm thankful to our legislators who have said to us, look, there's something happening here, and help us develop this to a point where we could put these projects in, the violence prevention, to be specific. And I'm thankful for their partnership and teamwork together as well, because they are taking on leadership and doing what they can, and in some cases handing off. There's an example that should be on our watch list, and that is, of course, the Reconnect Rondo project, where Representative McCollum has left some space, and then Senator Smith has taken it even further. And she was in a hearing recently with the Banking Committee and Secretary Buttigieg, and also asking questions about, as she shared the story of Rondo, funds that are to help to reconnect communities that were decimated by construction of our highway system. So I'd really like to ask that be on our watch list. Thankful for the information you shared today. And of course, as we have been supporting and uplifting that in our economic development work, we are interested to hear how that project might be supported. And it looks like it's on the cusp of some real possibilities. So thanking all of you for your support and really making the very best out of the ingredients that we had, responding to what was coming forward in this short term, creating some real possibility for us, and to look at areas that show up that will not prevent us from looking, at other categorical funds as well. So thank you so very, very much. And please keep that Rondo project, the Reconnect Rondo, on our watch list.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. We appreciate that. And I have a quick question, and then I think we are going to get to, what's coming up. What is our timing? I have a question around that. What are the projects we want to make sure we don't lose in some form? If they don't fit into an earmark, we need them in HUD, or we need them here, and a lot of moving parts here. But as far as, I just have a question about earmarks. So I used to think that earmarks had to be an infrastructure, a capital expense. But now when I'm seeing, as we're doing support services for housing, violence prevention grants, so have they expanded it, or it just was always expanded? I just didn't remember that they were expanded. But if we're still calling them earmarks, and I was getting used to calling them MDAs, member directed appropriations, but I guess there are a lot of different names now. I guess it can go for things other than capital, right? Obviously, since that's what they're looking at. So just someone clarify that for me, and then we can move on to, what do we need to do? What's coming up? How do we weigh in to things that are moving fast? Because we all want to make sure our Rivers Edge, our Rondo neighborhoods, things that are being watched.
Madam Chair, if I could,
Commissioner
we
Reinhardt.
had earmarks, and it's been a while since we've had them, but I know for programming such as the All Children's Excel program and other programming in the past as well. But generally speaking, the big dollar amounts are in infrastructure. But we've had policy and program funding earmarks in the past as well, especially as pilot projects, so that it can be replicated across the country.
Thank you for reminding me of that, Commissioner Reinhardt. And actually, the civic education dollars that I was that I worked with, that's right, that wasn't infrastructure either. So thank you for reminding me of that they can be used for other things. Okay. Well, maybe unless you have anything else to add on that, then do we want to move on? And I'm looking, Jen, or do we want to move on to, I don't see the slide in front of me, onto what's coming up, or Mike, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was just going to add a comment, not to that. First of all, Commissioner Reinhardt, when you decide not to be a commissioner anymore, let us know. We'll take you on our team here, and that was you nailed the answer there. But I just wanted to speak briefly to Chair Carter's comment about Rondo. We did have a number of conversations with Congresswoman McCollum's office as that project was coming forward. That, of course, ended up being an earmark directed at the Minnesota Department of Transportation, which is, not an entity that normally would get an earmark, right? It's for lots of different reasons. But, both the Ramsey County team as well as the St. Paul team, did look at how to be supportive of the Rondo priority that Congresswoman McCollum clearly wanted to put forward and ultimately did with DOT. The challenge for us as a county, or the challenge for the city as a city, and an early stage process like that is to become a party directly of the earmark could have meant that we would be a party to 20% of the funding should it get funded at a larger level, right? And a pretty significant risk to take if it became 20% of $500 million or something along those lines, right? But I do think this is a project that is exciting, has a real good chance of moving its first step forward in the FY22 appropriations process, and we certainly will continue to monitor on behalf of the county. It's exciting, and it does come back to a little bit of the Chair McGuire's comment about earmarks not directed at infrastructure. Is we could think creatively this summer or fall about, are there other things that we can do that aren't infrastructure with federal funds to reconnect these neighborhoods, right? So we know that the freeway is an impediment, but with smart people and creative people, could we overcome that impediment with other things that can connect a community? And so those are the kind of things that you may have some flexibility with the ARP funds or other CARES funds and federal funds going forward. So top of mind for sure. Thank you.
Jen, you want me to talk about next steps?
That'd be great. Thanks, Don.
Okay. Before I do that, though, I just want to provide some additional context. Obviously, we're focused right now on these congressional earmarks, but Commissioner McDonough talked about, and others, and Commissioner Reinhardt, there's plenty of federal grant funding to pursue. And the way we would engage the congressional delegation there and others like yourselves, your state legislators, the city, others, the cities in your county are to go after these as the competitive grants. But when you have support from the congressional delegation for those grants, you're more apt to receive them, even in a competitive environment. So that will be part of our work plan as we go forward. And it's also, I think, helpful to think about the fact that in the 7th Congressional District of Minnesota, the voters chose a new member of Congress, Michelle Fischbach, and she is not doing earmarks. So if you're a county in the 7th Congressional District, you're out of luck on the House side. So not only, there are other, Congressman Stauber in the 8th, also a Republican, is doing earmarks. The caucus, the Republican caucus in the House decided to approve the ability, but it doesn't mean all individual members are proceeding. So not only is Congresswoman McCollum on the committee, as Tom said, one of the cardinals, they call them, the subcommittee chairs, and her budget is the biggest in her subcommittee of all the individual budgets. So she's putting forward earmarks. She's advising us in a very specific way how best to proceed on each individual project, where to put it, how much to ask for, and her experience is so helpful. It should mean that Ramsey County does well in the long run on this process. So, I'm just pleased that you're not in the 7th Congressional District, because it'd be only the senators to help in that case. With that, just what can we do as we move forward to keep supporting all of these 4 that are in the earmark process, the Rondo project, River's Edge, and it's really important because this is a competitive process. It's unlikely that all member projects, say in the House, where each member could submit up to 10 projects, that all those projects will be funded fully. They may force us to make decisions. And so what we can do between now and then is to continue to educate and thank Congresswoman McCollum and the two senators when you see them out in the community. Remind them of these projects and why they're so important to the residents of Ramsey County or the constituents, their constituents. We can continue to work with the team at Ramsey to continue to find people, organizations to send letters of support. Even though there were deadlines, it doesn't mean you have to stop. We could do a commentary in the Chair Carter in one of the papers about the importance of the Rondo project to the community. You know, kind of that drumbeat of support is really important as we move forward. So that we'll keep looking for funding in all places for all the projects. And what we ask of you is to, when you see folks, to remind them and thank them, and explain again, you know, what these projects are, because keep in mind they're getting bombarded constantly, not just with all of this, but all kinds of issues from soup to nuts. And it's helpful if you see them enough, they will be able to repeat these projects back. And that's important when they're sitting at the table with their colleagues in the House or the Senate. And, you know, as Tom mentioned, Senator Leahy in the Senate is a chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Senator Klobuchar, Senator Smith can say, look, I really need funding for these projects. We want her to remember the Ramsey County project. So that is, and we'll keep monitoring this process. As we said, the Senate is very murky about how it works, or not how it works, but when things will be revealed. So we will keep on top of it and keep working with your team. And if we need you to engage at a specific time, we'll let you know that. Jen, that's all I have, unless Mike.
I have a question, because we brought it up actually on Friday at our legislative team meeting, you know, about whether it would be good for us to meet with Betty. We usually do it once a year, you know, and just to have a conversation with her. Is this good timing? I think we've been sort of wondering, I'm looking to you, Jen, too, because I know you talk to her office all the time. It's not that we haven't been connecting with her, but as electeds, we haven't had our one-on-ones with her, our board to Betty meeting. So I'm just curious if you think that would be helpful and when we should think about doing that. I don't know.
Madam Chair, I definitely think it would be helpful. And, you know, maybe in another couple, 2-3 weeks from now, they're very busy in Washington right now crafting the legislation and hearing testimony. But, you know, having an opportunity to visit just as elected officials with the Congresswoman, thank her in person would be great. She is getting back to the district pretty regularly. She just did an event this last Saturday in Washington County, a little groundbreaking for a road up there. So, you know, those are always fun things too. So as you think about things going on in your districts or in the county as a whole, that, you know, people want to be there for a little community event like a groundbreaking or whatever, let's not invite her because we think she's too busy. As you guys know, people like to get out into the community, and now that we've had an opportunity to get in a vaccine and take off our masks and recognize each other again, that I think it's a great suggestion, and we'll work with Jennifer to get that scheduled. Jennifer and Melissa also talked about doing a little county staff briefing where we could invite Senator Smith, Senator Klobuchar, and Betty McCollum's staff to, you know, to see some of the projects, get a briefing, maybe walk River's Edge, because again, I think we know that's a priority of the county, and we want to, you know, get people to sort of visualize that in a real way. It's a little bit hard, I think, to visualize it from some of the materials. Not that they're bad materials, don't get me wrong, but it's just, you know.
Always good to see it in person. No, I think that's a great idea. We could put a little tour together. I mean, River's Edge, Rondo, or whatever we spent. I mean, I think it would be really helpful for the staff, and if our electeds can be there, great. But I think also to do a deliberate meeting with Betty, and I don't know that we usually see Senators Smith and Klobuchar in DC, but if they're ever in town, I think we're willing. I think as a board, we're willing to do whatever we need to do, meet with them, talk to them whenever we think it's appropriate, whenever we can get it on the schedule.
Well, and I'll jump in on that. Thanks for landing on that point, Mary Jo, or Commissioner. I know Melissa and I know you guys are all ready to jump in and be where we need you to be, and you certainly have been in the past and whatnot. I'm actually going to credit Mike with the idea of doing a staff tour of Rivers Edge and whatnot. We already do that for MMB and the state Senate and the state House, and we've done that a couple of times. But you know, that would be a really easy thing to do, as more and more of us are kind of excited to get out and be amongst our peers again and do that sort of thing. So like Don said, we'll kind of put together a little work plan on this. You know, as we get closer to noon, I would just point out, we did put together a federal platform last, you know, and signed off on it and whatnot. It was voted on in December, and everything that we
More minutes if anyone has any questions. Thank you for reminding us about our legislative platform. And I'm going back to the comment. I think Mike or Dawn or Tom made the comment about being creative, you know, with our requests. Like, let's see, can we find a way to connect community with, you know, with the environment and Rivers Edge, connect community around, you know, with some of these other earmarks. We're all really happy to think outside the box. So I think we're all willing to, you know, dream big. So Commissioner McDonough.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to circle back here because I think the conversation is really focused in on the earmarks, and that's good. That's what's going on right now. But this, you know, the pots of money out there at the federal level, especially after this last ARP or whatever they're called it, is just really large. And I want to check in here because I know our staff do as best a job as they can to pay attention to NOFAs and when things are being released, but that's a lot to juggle. And I'm just checking in, is that part of the scope of work that we could look to you, our federal folks here, to make sure they're connecting those NOFAs and whether it's workforce or HUD or whatever, so that we're not missing any of those opportunities? And then, you know, I think, Dawn, it was you or Mike or Tom, probably all three, yeah. It is important when we do put these in, when our congressional member is aware of it and might even be supportive and maybe can help with the administration and connecting those dots when we're putting those grants in. But I want to make sure we're getting all those in. I don't want it to just fall on our department heads or our staff to be, you know, finding out when the opportunities are.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonough. Great point. Yes, you're right. We focused a little, we were focusing on earmarks, but you're right. There's just this huge amount of money now that we want to be accessing. So Jen, did you have a comment on that?
I just wanted to affirm for Commissioner McDonough and others, that is part of the work that we're getting right now. Tom does a wonderful job. I bet I get emails 3 to 4 times a week with grant opportunities. And Melissa and I have been sharing those with the right staff. There's a lot out there. So I think we need to pull together a staff and whatnot and really focus in, because even those applications can be quite a bit of work.
Thank you. And I really appreciate Commissioner McDonough that you brought that up. I mean, that is great. That's great work. And thanks for work doing that, our team. Okay, Commissioner Jim, did you have anything else? Are you good? Okay, Commissioner Carter.
I just wanted to double check. I don't think we had the presentation, at least I didn't. And I'm hoping that that is available for us after the meeting.
The slides that we just showed,
Yeah.
Commissioner Carter. Yeah, we can make sure that you get those. Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we'll get them posted and we'll make sure they get sent to the board. We ended up with an opportunity to get today on kind of quickly. And so I gave them a little bit longer to get the slides done.
Makes sense.
And on the previous point, just the other piece to keep in front of everyone, there's 2 levels to try and understand ARP funding right now. I think one is some of the federal opportunities, as Commissioner McDonough referenced and Jen just spoke about. thanks to this team for helping us in that space of making us aware of what's out there. The second part is when we know the state is getting money, but it's unclear if they're going to use previous allocations or not. The instructions that we're just using. So as we're going through budget meetings, this is a challenge for us. And what we're actually, you'll hear more about this through the budget meetings. We're actually working from kind of building a floor that does not include ARP as the first part of our budget. And then we're going to try to build in from there going forward because there's just too much that's unknown, particularly on the state revenue side. And so we're painting, it's kind of bleak, quite frankly, at the beginning, and it hopefully will not be quite so bleak by the time I talk to you in August. But what we are kind of instructing out of the gate is just to use past funding precedents as the way forward. It's just unclear whether that's actually what's going to happen at the state level. And I think a lot's going to happen between now and these special sessions to figure that out.
Thank you. Thank you, County Manager O'Connor. And thank you, Wright, for this opportunity. I know this opened up on the schedule and for being nimble and for all of you for being quick to be able to be here at this meeting. I know everybody is really busy. And so this is a great meeting, and I hope we continue to have more of them as we need to. I mean, I know that we'll try to make ourselves available as much as we need to be for you, but appreciate all of your work with Jen and Melissa and all of you on this call. Of course, our staff is working hard on all of these things as well. Is there anything else? Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, Mary Jo,
Commissioner
I was
McDonough.
wonder if Ryan had some information we didn't, because he pluralized session and said sessions. And I'm wondering if he's got some information that we don't have.
Yeah, I go with the past precedent being a direction for future behavior. That's all I got.
All right.
Yeah, good catch. Yeah, that'd be. We have a lot of work to do moving forward. We appreciate everything that's been done, the quickness and nimbleness that everybody is showing. We want to continue to do that, and we will just continue to work with you. And thank you so much for your work. And Jen and Melissa, thanks so much for everything you're doing. And so Don, Tom, and Mike, thanks. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting, and you all have a great weekend. It's not a weekend yet. It's just a Tuesday. Oh my gosh.
No,
Yeah,
we'll go with it. We like
Meeting,
that.
yep.
Wait,
Good
wait.
meeting.
A weekend, yeah. Anyway, thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Like that, huh?